So we know this is what needs to happen. The question is how? So as a part of our study, we asked these scientists to look around the world and find all of the emissions. And this is what they came up with. This had actually never been done before. And there's some of the details in here that you probably can't see from your chair, but I'll explain it to you in broad brushstrokes. Essentially what they identified is there are 7 sectors where you can find most of the emissions you need to get to a win, and that is halting global warming at 2 degrees centigrade. Those sectors are power, so utilities, industry, buildings, transportation, forestry, agriculture, and waste and other sources. So now you know where the emissions are. This is essentially a roadmap to win the battle against global warming. It's a design to win, if you will. It's the first time it's been done. It's pretty consistent in terms of its treatment of emissions. And the best part is that we can get 83% of the reductions you see here with known technologies that are commercially available today. This is something we can do today. Why aren't we doing it? I'm going to get to that in just a minute. There's an important first thing you have to do as well. You have to set priorities. So now we know the 7 sectors we need to act in to win the battle. But you don't just go at them all at once. We probably don't have the capacity. We certainly don't have the political capital. We might not even have the financial capital to actually do this all at once. So the first priority is to avoid lock-in. What I mean by lock-in is there are decisions we're making right now that will dramatically determine our ability to address this problem in the future. For example, coal-fired power plants, by far the worst offenders. If you build a coal-fired power plant today, you will lock in the emissions from that plant for up to 50 years. That's the lifespan of a coal-fired power plant. There are a number of these proposed in the US. I'll show you an example of where some of them are right now. But you cannot build those coal-fired power plants, and you especially can't build them unless you're absolutely ensuring carbon capture and sequestration, which is the ability to take the carbon dioxide from the coal plant and pump it underground and sequester it and make sure that it's not going to enter the atmosphere. Another major source of emissions is buildings. A lot of buildings, I think most buildings in the US actually leak like sieves. Those are sources of additional carbon emissions because they're using energy that they don't need to be using, that are essentially providing safety and comfort to the people in the building. You know, the thing that Amory Lovins, a famous energy researcher and economist, used to talk about was people don't want, you know, the refrigerator to be 40 degrees. They want a cold beer. And it's the same is true in our buildings. We don't want our buildings cooled to a certain temperature. We want them to be comfortable. So we know how to do that, but we have to do it all over the world. Buildings last 100 years or more, and we have to stop building buildings today that are releasing huge amounts of emissions into the atmosphere. Just as an example, China is in the process of building an entire USA right now. Over the next 17 to 20 years, they're going to build a USA worth of houses, factories, streets, cities, shops. It matters a whole lot whether they build green buildings, compact layouts, efficient transportation systems that stitch it all together. If their cities look more like Houston than like Paris, we're in serious trouble. And so we have to help China understand how to build sustainably. So the first thing we have to do is make investment decisions that avoid the lock-in, avoid new coal-fired power plants, build infrastructure that is climate safe, carbon neutral, or carbon negative. So this is a first-term priority. These are things that we have to do. They have to be done in the next 10 years. So just to recap real briefly, the first step here is don't lose. So we've defined the win, and we've determined what's first in getting to the win, and that's avoiding the lock-in. Part 2 is position to win, so you want to accelerate the deployment of clean technologies, ensure that innovation is shared across economies and across national borders. And then by 2100, you've won. You've stabilized at a level that's higher than what a lot of scientists think is okay, but it's lower than utter disaster. And so that's what this sort of shows a roadmap toward. Just again to show the challenge of why we need to do this very quickly. The top line is our current path going towards 60 gigatons of annual emissions in the year, per year. The bottom line is 30, stabilized at 2030. And those different shadings, those are the wedges. Some of you might be familiar with a study that was done a couple years ago by a team of scientists at Princeton, Robert Socolow and Stephen Pacala, I think were the two, who identified these wedges. What we've done is we've dissected the wedges and found the locations on Earth where you can find those emissions. And then you have a small chunk of emissions reduction that are not known at this time. We're sort of anticipating that somebody might come up with a solution. There actually are solutions that would fit into that category that are already in development. But here's what happens if you wait. Now you've built buildings that are inefficient. Now you've built coal-fired power plants. Now you have this huge chunk of unknown mitigation, and you don't know where to find it. And the reason you don't know where to find it is it's not there anymore. You've lost your chance. This has to happen in the next 10 years. We have to get started today. So, in addition to the 7 sectors, you also need to know how to prioritize your resources to know where to look. So we know that power is a problem, we know that transportation is a problem in buildings, but you don't want to just go into every country and address those sectors in every country. You have to set priorities. And fortunately, one of the things that this group did was they identified the regions of the world where you get most of your emissions. So now you can set priorities. As it turns out, there are 6 regions that really matter when you're talking about getting these emissions reductions. China, everybody's heard about that. India, one of the fastest growing economies and the largest democracy on earth. The European Union has shown a lot of leadership, but they have major challenges. The political support for emissions reductions in Europe are not nearly as deep as they need to be. They need a lot of help over there. And then, of course, the United States, where energy efficiency may be a sign of personal virtue, but it's not a strategy for national energy policy, as our Vice President once so eloquently said.